Hello, everyone. Heidi here from Rain Country. God is good all the time. Let's get going on the topic of just making the most of small spaces. So, this isn't just talking about one area. We're talking about the whole gamut of things. So, I do have a video specifically on like food storage for small spaces. So, trying to make the most of just the different areas around your house. And then I have the small space homesteading, and then I have the video on container gardening. So I'll be kind of covering bits and pieces of some of that. But if you're really interested in this topic, I do recommend you go watch those videos. It doesn't really matter how much square footage you have in your house or out in your yards or how many acres you have. We can always find ways to make better use of the space that we have. So let's say you're gardening and or you're wanting to get into gardening and you have very, very limited space. Maybe you don't even have a yard because you live in an apartment. It's like, well, how can I garden? Well, some people do a lot indoors. And some people even use like the stackable pots, like the green stock indoors, as long as they have maybe a sliding glass door to set it close to or a big window to set it close to. I would recommend turning it at least every couple of days in that case, so everything all the way around it could get sun. You've also Most people will have some kind of window that they can grow herbs or smaller, even lettuces in, as long as they don't get too hot, the lettuces. But they don't need a whole lot of sun. That's what's great about lettuce, is you can grow lettuces pretty good in low sun areas. So I, in fact, found the best place for me to grow lettuces is it faces south. It's a good place for me to start a lot of seeds. So I've got shelves on the south side of my greenhouse on the outside. So I'll start a lot of things out there that don't need a lot of heat, in the earlier part of the spring. And like right now, I've got lettuces starting to grow in those, but they'll just stay there. Right now, they're getting plenty of sun, which is fine because the sun is warming it up. Well, except for today because it's rainy. But the sun gets to warm those pots up, and I don't have to have them in the greenhouse. And then by the time the lettuces start getting to that point where they're growing and they don't need as much direct sun, the grapevines have filled in quite a bit and shaded that whole area. So it makes a really great place for me to grow my lettuces. And when I first started planting things there, I mean, Patrick put those shelves on there many years ago, and I first started growing strawberries there, and it was great for growing strawberries because my grapevines were very young and not filling that whole area, and so they got sun all through the summer. But no longer a good place for growing strawberries because it doesn't get enough sun through the summer. But it's great for lettuces. Even pansies do pretty good if I put them in the pot on the end that's more likely to catch some sun. If at least have maybe a deck or some kind of outdoor area, you can consider having even just getting bookshelves as long as they're open, and don't have an enclosed back. And then you can put plants on shelves. In fact, I had Patrick build me a shelf. It's just 2 shelves to go along the east-facing side of his shop, which faces out onto the deck. And I use that to grow other things that don't need a whole ton of sun, such as violets. I'll let my violets grow on there. The thyme seems to do pretty good there too. And thyme does like sun, but it seems to not mind not getting all day sun either. And violets I find here at least, do better in areas, they get bigger in the areas where they don't get a lot of direct sun. Anywhere where they get a lot of direct sun, they'll grow, but they just don't grow as big or as lush. So yeah, the violets do really well there. I just found them growing wild out in my yard. They were little tiny things and put them in these pots and realized they loved it there. So the other thing too is when it comes to your small space gardening is just understanding what of the plants you have need more sun and what can grow well in shade. And you can find, in fact, I shared this a lot of times that I found that potatoes will grow in shady areas. You might not get as many potatoes, but they will grow. And so the very first well, no, it wasn't the very first year I grew potatoes, but, it was years later and we kinda redid everything, and I was trying to make the most of the space without having to get rid of the pool and the trampoline at that time because we were still using it, and so I planted potatoes right up next to the house facing north, which means it almost never gets sun there. Gets indirect sun, but no real sun, but it stays really moist there. Got quite a few nice sized potatoes, so I was surprised. I was just trying it to see what would happen, and I was surprised how well they did. But with potatoes, the more sun and more water they get, the more and bigger they'll get. So they do prefer sun, but you might be surprised at the things that can grow fine in shade. If you like beet greens, you don't really care about beets, but you like beet greens, you can grow those in the shade. You won't get good big roots, big beets, but you'll get plenty of greens. Coming back to container gardening is just a really great way to make use of space. We like to watch a channel called Kirsten Dirksen. One of the last ones that she did was of somebody who lives uh, in DC in in an alley, and he bought this little lot right in the alley. And the way he designed his house to make the most out of this space was so cool. I mean, I would hate to live there, in that area, but I really could appreciate what he did. So I love watching that kind of stuff to see how people make the most of their space, whether it be their acreage or the space inside their home. But what I really, really loved, of course, was what he did to the roof. And he had a garden up there and had just all these big containers and all kinds of stuff growing in his garden up there. So he's doing it on top of his roof. So you sometimes it's just learning how to be creative and look around at what you have. Whether it be a big space or a little space isn't really even just the point. It's like maybe even if you do have a lot of acreage to grow, but you're getting older and you're like, I don't want to have to walk all the way out there to get that. How can I do more and keep it closer to the house? And so, when I got started here, this is obviously long before we bought the property down the road and the mountain property. We were just trying to make the most of our area here while we were looking for more property. And now it's like I really like keeping it here because everything is close. It's just right outside my door. And some of the things I just tried things. I just got creative. So for a while we had a peach tree, a little dwarf peach tree growing in a pot out back. And I thought, you know what? I'm going to plant some beans around this. And I did that for a couple of years before we ended up moving the peach tree out front and then eventually getting rid of it. But so I planted beans around there and the beans used the peach tree and it was small enough that it wasn't a big deal. And so pole beans, obviously. And so they climbed up the peach tree and through the branches. So I had beans in my peach tree. And that was really cool. It was a way I was able to make the most of the space where the peach tree already was, and I could grow beans as well. So this is why I prefer climbing beans or pole beans or runner beans because they will climb on anything pretty much. So I've tried doing the beans and corn thing, and that wasn't super successful because here the beans, no matter when you plant them, the beans always just grow too fast and the corn grows too slowly. However, I have planted beans in other areas and around other things. So like planting beans around my marshmallow plants. You can plant your beans right at the base of your marshmallow plants or any other plant that can grow fairly tall and strong, sunflowers as well. And they will grow up those plants. So I have this really great picture of my scarlet runner beans growing around my marshmallow. So you can see the white flowers of the marshmallow and then the bright, scarlet flowers from the beans. And it's such a cool picture. I just love it. So I got beans and marshmallow growing in the same area. You guys have seen where I've taken the juniper out front, that I really don't want to get rid of it because of the privacy it kind of adds to my front window and deck from the rest of the neighbors down this way. But it's like, how can I make more use of this space? Because I got to prune it up. So I opened it up to get more sun coming straight down on the inside of the juniper. And then Patrick just took some wood rounds and made little shelves. So I have pots with strawberries growing in them there. I got strawberries growing in pots everywhere. Here, that's the other thing that grows best in pots here are strawberries. If I try to put them in the ground, the slugs will eat them. And, they're more like, it's not like they don't come up on the deck, but they're less likely to come up on the deck and eat my strawberries. So they do best in pots. Grapes, I haven't done this because I already got my grapes where they're at, but I've seen people plant grapes around their fruit trees. And this one guy, I can't remember who he was now. I can almost see his face. You guys probably heard of him. But, he grew grapes around his fruit trees, and the grapes would grow up into the fruit tree. So he's getting the fruit, let's say it's pears, apples, whatever. Plus the fruit tree was just full of grapes. He said he got 7 times more grapes off his grapevines growing them around the fruit trees. There's going to be a lot of things you'll find is going to be trial and error depending on your space, depending on which way your different gardens are facing, how shady things are. Some people live in places where they got a lot of tall trees around them and all they have is shade. Look for shade-loving plants. There's a lot of herbs that you can grow in the shade too. I mean, nettle loves cooler, shadier areas anyway. So if you live in a hot place, but you really want to grow nettle, but you have areas that have a lot of shade, it might do okay there if it has plenty of shade. It would need to be shaded from the sun all day in that case. My nettle gets a lot, it faces south. It's up against a house facing south, and it does get a lot of sun, but because of where it is, it's a little more protected, and it gets a lot of rain, a lot of moisture, and so it does very, very well. And like I said in a previous live show, it gets like 8 feet tall if I let it. It'll just keep growing and growing and growing. And yes, cattle panels. So we have a couple of arched cattle panel areas that all grow like my snow peas. Those snow peas go right up against the chicken coop so that, on the section of that arched cattle panel right up next to the chicken coop, because the chicken coop will shade it from the hottest part of the sun, just right in that area later in the day. So the snow peas do really good there. And then on the other half of the cattle panel, I'll grow more beans. And then we have horse fencing, or it's either horse fencing or hog fencing. I don't know, but whatever. And Patrick put that up on one section of my garden, and that's where I grow most of my beans, but I love putting up a lot of beans. So I'll grow beans wherever I can. So I'll grow them in that arched area. And then we have a second arched area that I use for growing pumpkins and other types of climbing, things like that. A lot of times I'll put beans in there too. And then I have pots in various areas, like just outside the greenhouse, where I have little chains hanging down, and I'll plant beans in there, and the beans will climb up those chains. So I have one on my deck like that too. Put beans in there and they'll climb up the chains, and then they'll kind of go across the gutter on Pat's shop, and it looks cool, and it gives me a few more beans. I don't get near as many beans off those as I do on the ones in the garden area, on the hog wire or horse fence, whichever one that is. Horse wire. Okay, thanks. Thank you, Mr. Rain. That's where I get most of them. And then on the arched, cattle panels. But it's still fun to do that. It adds more color. It's just another place I can get a few more beans. I also have honeysuckle growing in a pot on my deck, and sometimes the beans will climb around that as well, because I got them like right next to each other. But I plant smaller watermelons next to cattle panel and put the melons in recycled ice cream buckets so the weight doesn't break the vine. Very good. I've also heard of people using like nylon stockings for melons, for cantaloupe, which is melon, of course, and other things like that. And like, to break up that weight a little bit. So that's a really great idea. I personally haven't done that one. I have 8-foot panel fence and I put up rain gutters. I planted flowers, herbs. That's what I was going to bring up, Karen. Thank you. So you can use gutters to plant in too. Now, keep in mind they're kind of shallow. Some people say, oh, plant strawberries in the gutters. Well, that might be good for a year or two, but because they're so shallow and they don't allow a lot of growth, expansion, and strawberries are perennial, so they're going to keep coming back and keep growing. You wouldn't be able to do that for long, but uh, the gutters, I've seen people do that where they just take the gutters and maybe even paint them a pretty color, and then actually install the gutters directly to the side of a building and then plant in those. And that is a great place to grow your herbs such as thyme and your lettuces. I find the lettuces, I just love doing that kind of thing. Well, I don't use the gutters, but it's a similar idea where I have the long, skinny pots like that on the shelves and then grow the lettuces in there. As far as like food storage, learn to make the most out of the areas that you have inside to store all those things you're getting from your garden, such as your beans and whatnot. You may not have spare bedrooms like we now do because our boys have long since moved out of the house. And so their bedrooms have become two different types of storage areas. And one is specifically our pantry. So and we have a whole bunch of shelves in there. And so we've got that whole area there, but that's not the only place we use for food storage. I've got, if you go watch that video on small, what do I call it? Food storage for small spaces. Like I said, I show a lot of my ideas and images, like even like in a guest room. I've got a couple of like plastic totes stocked up on top of each other on one side of the bed that then I covered with a pretty Afghan to use as an end table. But inside those totes is food. And it's just things like that. So, and like I always like to say, even though I've never done this, I just think it was such a creative idea. The lady that took apart a couple of her doors and stored soup packs, anything small and skinny that she could stick in there inside the door and then put the doors back together. Something you'd want something that would have pretty much an indefinite shelf life. See, I've used gutters for lettuces. I called it my shade garden. Not fancy, but it worked for 2 years. Very cool, Dana. Thank you. So some other ideas for like indoor food storage would be, don't forget your bedroom closets. Most everybody has a shelf in there. If you don't already have it packed full of stuff, consider using that as an area to store food or under your bed or even getting like those long skinny totes, they're short like this. They're made for going under the bed and you can store food in there. And that way, all you got to do is slide it out. Or if you want a whole new bed, get one that has built-in drawers at the bottom, and you can use that. Unless, of course, you need that space for clothes. But some ideas. Bookshelves, putting food, like a lot of times you'll have a lot of books on a bookshelf that, where you have a whole bunch of space in front of the books where you can put, now I've done this too, put food, like some of my canned goods, my home canned goods at the very, very back of the bookshelf and then put the books in front. That not only hides the food, but it just gives another area that you can use for storing food if you need it. I mean, especially for those people who live in an apartment or are just trying to find the best way possible to put up as much food as they can. You can put risers under your bed frame for more space. Right, Cindy, thank you for that. So that's another idea too. I've seen, I think it was on a Doomsday Prepper, where people were putting like water storage tanks. They put it in their bedroom and then put their mattress on top of the tanks. It made their bed really high up, so they had to like use a ladder to get into their bed. But you always got something like that. Or just get a big old bunk bed and then have all that storage underneath. Like make a closet under the bunk bed. My husband took a wall board off, few walls made shelves between each stud. Yes, Teresa, thank you for sharing that. I have seen, in fact, I think I shared some of that, some images of something like that in that video I was talking about, food storage for small spaces. It's such a great idea. If you have the kind of sofa that's fully closed in, like has a fabric back, and it and if it's up against a wall, you could consider opening up the fabric in the back of a couch. Usually you got a lot of, if it's not a hide-a-bed, you've got a lot of empty space in there, and you can use that for, like, lightweight storage. And not that you can't use it for heavyweight storage, but I wouldn't recommend it. But, that might even be a good place to store toilet paper because it's lightweight. That way, if you need to move the furniture around, it's hardly gonna weigh any more than it would otherwise. And this goes over coffee tables too. If you have a coffee table, that's maybe fully enclosed, people might use it for storing magazines and stuff. You put food storage in there too. And if you don't have a coffee table and you want one, get one that's going to provide you an area where you can store food and keep it hidden so so it looks nice, or you just want to hide it so people don't know that you're a food hoarder. We have attic space. I don't store anything up there myself, but I have mentioned in the past using like attic storage for things that can handle heat. It may not be good for storing food, but you might be able to store other things up there that would then free up other areas in the house for storing food. So let's say your summer, winter clothes, those kind of things. Box them up, store them in the attic, and then you'll have more space in your bedroom closets, under the bed, and whatnot to store food. Thank you all for coming in. Really appreciate you being here, the fun chit chat that we get to have, as well as covering some good, interesting topics, and hopefully people learned something. And I hope you all have a great rest of your day. And of course, a great week ahead of you. Thanks for coming in. Take care, and God bless.